Hello and welcome to the Outcast Faith Podcast. I am the host, Faith Summerfield, and this is our very first episode. I wanted to start this podcast because I really felt God putting it on my heart to start a podcast and to talk about my testimony. And in the future, hopefully we'll be having many guest speakers on the podcast to share their testimonies. I'm going to start by saying why it's called the Outcast Faith Podcast. I chose that name through prayer. I was praying, asking God what the podcast should be named, and I really felt that I was hearing Outcast, and that's something that I have felt God speaking to me on recently, and I don't view an outcast as a bad thing. I think God tends to use people that society deems as outcasts to do amazing works through him, and I think you see countless times throughout the Bible of God using someone that everybody else was like, they're an outcast. There's something wrong with them. They don't deserve to be here. They don't deserve to be anything other than what they are. And they're an outcast. And you see that with Moses. And you see God uses Moses to deliver his people. And Moses had a stutter. He was an introvert. He hated public speaking. But God chose him to go speak to Pharaoh to free his people. And you see that with Paul. I mean, he literally persecuted Christians, and God chose him to be this amazing leader and to go tell the nations about Jesus. And, you just see that countless times throughout the Bible. You see that today with people who are sharing God's word with the world. They aren't who you would think would be doing that. And if you've heard a lot of these people's testimonies, they didn't think they'd be doing that. And for me, where I have ended up, which I will get to in a minute, I've never thought that I was necessarily good enough for what God wants me to do, but God is using me anyway, and I can see it. He's making a path for me to be able to reach the lost through talents he has given me, and whether or not I feel good enough for that, God has made a way and God is using me. So that's the reason for the name of the podcast, and hopefully we will be having many speakers and people who can identify with that on the podcast. So I'm gonna just dive right in. I'm gonna share my testimony on this first episode. I would say for me that my testimony started a little bit before I was born, because circumstances that set up for then when I was born are what contributed a lot to my testimony. My mom and dad got married, and my dad had 2 sons from a previous marriage, my brothers, and they had some problems with that because naturally my brothers had a little bit of a hard time, adjusting to having a new mom and everything. And they, have just always had a little bit of a difficulty with that. And that set up for them when I was born. And we lived happily for a couple years, and we were a nice family, and, I love my brothers. And there were just some problems, though, when they hit, like, teenage years, and understandably, they're working through emotions and everything. And my oldest brother, we were having problems with him, so my parents decided to send him to like a military kind of school so that, he could work through some of that. And he had always wanted to go into the military like my dad had. And so it's just a good way for him to work through that. But it just wasn't working. And, he was still having problems. And my grandparents became a bit of a safe place for him. but at the cost of a relationship with my parents. So he went to live with my grandparents, and it was just then my parents, me, and my other brother. And my other brother had some problems with my older brother leaving because, they were best friends. And so he struggled a lot too. And then eventually he ended up enlisting in the army. And then it was just my parents and I. And I wouldn't say that, because of that, then my life wasn't as good or anything. I definitely was sad that they left, and that was hard on the family, and I know it was really hard on my parents, but I don't know, especially at that age, I always assumed like they'll be back, and so we kind of moved forward, and we were just the three of us for a couple of years, and it was okay. And I've been homeschooled my whole life, so a lot of that time was me being homeschooled and just doing things, the three of us. And then my mom got pregnant, and we were all really excited about that and really ready for that. But the baby didn't make it. She had a miscarriage, and that was really hard on all of us. I think, we were really excited to have that baby and have her be a part of our family. But, it didn't work out. But I know it was really hard on my mom especially. And it was just hard to work through that once you had your hopes up for that. And that kind of started a hard period for my family. And we just had to work through the emotions of that. And then I'm not sure we were even really through the emotions of that when my mom got pregnant again. And it was kind of scary. We didn't want to get our hopes up, but it worked out. And my little sister was born. And that was in 2019, and, she's just so beautiful and amazing, and she's been such a blessing to us, and that was really amazing, but it was hard too because there was a bit of a problem, with her being born, and my mom got sick after that, and that was really scary for me because the doctors didn't even want any extra family members to be with her in the hospital room because there was a chance that could set her having a seizure off. And so that was pretty scary, and I had to just come home, and luckily my grandma was in town, so she stayed with me, but it was really scary, and I wasn't in contact with them a lot. I didn't really know what was going on, and it's quite a bit younger. And that was really scary. But my mom made it, and, then we had my beautiful sister Aria. And so that was really amazing. And then, 2020 happened. And I think for a lot of young people, this is a part of their testimony because it was quite a big ordeal. And I remember when we went to North Carolina really early in 2020. And so I remember walking through the airport and just seeing so many people there. It was so crowded, and it was why are all these people here? Well, they were fleeing and trying to get out while they still could. So then in March of 2020, my grandfather died, and that was really hard for me because I was so close with him, and we had to travel back to North Carolina where he lived to see my grandma and help her with the funeral and everything and going through his possessions, and it was just really difficult. And there were things with family members and things going on with that, and it's just really hard when you lose someone close to you, and then you have to deal with, you know, stuff you would never have to deal with otherwise. Like, you have to go through their things, you have to plan a funeral, invite people, and, you know, you have to go see family members and talk to them, and it's quite overwhelming. And for me, I think it was just before I turned 13 this happened, and so I was at a pivotal point in my life as far as, like, you know, puberty and everything, and it just wasn't an ideal time for that, and I had a lot of mixed emotions around that. And I'm the kind of person that when I go through grief or go through something really hard, I don't like share that with people. I don't want to be a burden, I feel like. And I feel like, oh, other people are going through this too. Like, this was my mom's dad. Like, imagine how she feels. And so I'm like, no, I need to be there for everyone else, instead of realizing, like, no, I have emotions too, and I can tell people about that. And so I kind of kept all that inside, and, you know, I was already feeling upset about that. And then a couple months later in October, my older brother died. And that was really hard for me, because that meant, you know, I hadn't talked to him in, I think it was about 6 years that I hadn't talked to him. And I didn't get to talk to him before he died. I know that my dad had been in contact with him a little bit, but I didn't get to do that. And that's something that still hurts me. I wish that I had gotten to speak to him before he died. And I don't know, I wanted to, like, tell him that I forgave him, and that it was okay, everything that happened, and that he was still my brother and I still loved him. And I didn't, you know, feel like I got to do that at all. And then also going and dealing with, you know, this side of the family that we hadn't talked to in all that time, because of the choices they made to support my brother and not my parents. And it just made it really hard. And you know, the situation was already hard, and then you deal with family members and deal with everything, and we didn't really know anything about his life, or, you know, he was married and he had a kid, and we didn't know anything about it because we weren't in his life. And that was really hard for me, definitely. That time, you know, I had already been feeling a certain way about my grandpa, but that time of my life felt then and now really dark, and just almost like it didn't happen, because it feels like another world and like another time that, like, it didn't really happen. It feels like I just blacked out or something and dreamt it. It was really hard. And then, you know, coming out of that, it's for the next couple of years, the next probably 3 years, I felt really depressed, and I would say it felt so dark in my life, and it just felt like everything kept going wrong. Like, it was like between COVID and then, you know, family members dying, that nothing could go right. And I was dealing with, you know, body issues, and I began to hate the way I looked. I gained a lot of weight because I turned, like, to eating as a coping mechanism, and then from gaining a lot of weight from that, I began to hate the way my body looked. And I do think I developed a bit of an eating disorder. I haven't been diagnosed or anything, but I think I became like a binge eater. And then I hit a point where it was like, oh no, I'm way overweight. and I hate the way I look, and now I need to starve myself. And it's all a result still of the grief that I went through. And I still have problems with that today, where I start to just think something a little wrong, or I start to I saw something on TV that ends up like, ooh, I need to look like her or something. And I've lost a lot of the weight that I gained, and so it's really not like crazy anymore, but it's definitely something I still struggle with. And so I was going through that, and going through feeling so depressed, and anxiety, and I know I had a couple panic attacks in there also. And I got to the point where I had decided, like, what's the point of living a life when you feel so depressed and so anxious and just you hate yourself, and like, what is the point? Here I am, and there's no point. And so I had begun to think of committing suicide, and I had been thinking about it for probably a couple months before it got to the point where I was like, no, yeah, that's what needs to happen. And I remember I was in my room, and I was just on the floor, like, crying, and I was just like calling out to God, and I was like, God, why did you let this happen to me? And why is my life like this? And like, God, can you just take me now? Like what is the point of me being here then? Like, you're not doing anything with me, and I'm not sure that you even really care, and so just take me now. And I was just like on my knees on the floor, and I felt like a little whisper. It wasn't even a big thing where I was like, I almost was like, did I hear that? Was that God? And I just felt him say, like, I'm not done with you yet. Like, you have more to do. And like, I really felt like seen by God in that moment too. Like, he totally understood it. He was like, I get it. It's been not great, but like, you have more to do. You're important, and you have a purpose here, and I'm not just letting you go through all this for no reason. And so after that, I decided, like, okay, I believe you, God, and I'm gonna stay with it then, because you said that. But I don't feel necessarily like close to you, and I don't really feel like pursuing a relationship with you right now, and I still feel really depressed and dark and not great in my life right now. And I felt like God was okay with that. He was like, okay, like, but you are gonna have more to do. And so I went on, and I just stayed kind of depressed for a while, and stayed like that. And I think everyone in my family had a little bit of a hard time, getting through some of that stuff, and we all just kind of kept along. But no one in my family even knew that I had thought about committing suicide and that I was that depressed. I think everyone was like, we're all struggling a little bit, but everybody's fine. We're going to get through this. And so I just, like I said before, I keep everything inside. And so we just kind of went on, and we began searching for a good church, because we had never quite found like our church. And, I think that was a big deal to my parents. Like, we need to move forward in our lives, and we need to find a good solid church that's going to help us with that. And so, we kind of hopped around from some different churches, never quite finding the right one. And then I believe it was 2024 when we started going to Oro Valley Church of the Nazarene. And I remember the first time we went to the church, because I remember like walking in and being like, wow, this is a huge church. Like, you know, nobody's even gonna like see us or care that we're here. And it's huge. Like, hopefully the teaching is good, because I'm not sure about like how we would find community here or how anyone would even care that we're here, because this is crazy. And so we were just like walking in, we went and found seats, and I remember when the pastor came out, if anyone watching goes to my church, it was Pastor Craig. And I remember when he came out and I was like, wow, this guy's like so fired up and like really excited to be here. And I don't even remember what he talked about, but I do remember thinking it was really impactful and just being like, wow, like this is what I've been missing out on. And I haven't been pursuing God, and I haven't been wanting to be a part of anything involving God. But like this guy is really into it. He's really like feeling this like love and strength from God, and he comes out here and he's fired up. And like what he was talking about, I don't remember now, but I remember at the time it was really impactful, and I was just like, wow, maybe I do want to be a part of this. And like the worship too, the worship was really amazing. Music is a really big deal for me. It's been a big deal throughout my whole life, and you know, during times of grief and everything, what I turn to is music. And it was probably around 2022 is when I started teaching myself guitar. And so at this time I was, you know, still kind of learning guitar, teaching myself from YouTube videos and everything. And I thought that they had like an amazing band. I was like, wow, this is a great band. Like, you know, everyone says you don't want to have like a concert at church, and I don't think they're concert level, but it was like, sometimes when you go to a church and it doesn't have great music, for me, that's one of the best parts of church for me. And so I was just like really glad they had such great music. And I don't know, after that first time that we went, I was like, this is amazing. This seems like a really cool church. And the pastors at my church make the biggest point to meet every new person. Like, he will go stand out by the door, and they wait for like everybody to walk through the doors. If anyone wants to come and say hi to them, like you go up to them, you say hi, and you talk to them, and they are like ready to be there with you, ready to talk to you. And so that was a big part too of like, wow, this is a cool church. Like the pastors want to talk to everyone. That's weird. And so we started going to that church more consistently, and, you know, just still kind of, you know, trying it out, seeing how it is. And I don't know, I really fell in love with the church, and I fell in love with the way that the pastors do things. And I know when my parents went to the membership class there, it was really cool because the pastors like had pictures of everyone, and they had to memorize your name and your photo, so then they would like know who you are. And that was also really impactful for me. And the pastors there have done such an amazing job of pouring into me and like being there anytime I needed something. I got involved with the band there, obviously, because I loved their music and everything. But the way that happened was we kind of have to go back a little bit. I had this assignment for one of my classes, and I needed to interview a pastor. And so I was like, okay, Pastor Craig, can I interview you? And I went into the church, I interviewed him and everything. And I told him after the interview that I was going to be going to the church's summer camp. It was rock band camp, and, you know, it was musical and everything. And he was like, no way, we have our worship leaders in here right now if you want to go like meet them. And I was like, you know, kind of nervous and like, oh, you know, okay. whatever. And we go back there, and I meet worship leader. Her name is Malin, and Malin was a really big part of my testimony and my journey to where I am today, because she really took me under her wing. And I kind of like, this first meeting, I kind of threw it out there, like, I was really hoping at the camp to sing and play guitar, and I didn't really see a way to sign up for that. And she was like, no, I've got you. You can do that. And I remember, like, after that meeting being like, she's not even going to remember me. Like, but then, like, as soon as I showed up for camp, she was like, oh, yeah, no, I've got you signed up here where you're going to go to singing classes on this day and guitar classes on this day. And then after camp, she got me, like, to sign up for the youth group band. And that was a really pivotal point for me, because I have always been really shy and introverted, and I had never gone to youth group before that. And I'm not the hugest, like, youth group person, because I've always connected with my family so much that I didn't feel the need to go to youth group. I'm like, I have a good relationship with God on my own, and my family is a really big part of that. And, like, me and my mom are so close, me being homeschooled and everything, we would just have, like, times during the day where we would just sit down and talk about life and how I'm doing with God and how I'm doing with everything. And so I felt like I had that, and I had church and everything, and I didn't need to go to youth group. And I still feel like that was true, but I do think the worship part needed to happen. I needed to be in that band, and I needed to put myself out there and perform. And that was really when I started performing. And this is the part where we get to, like, my calling, and I have never felt confident or good enough in my music to like perform in front of people or do that. I'm like, I'll go in my room and I'll close the door, and nobody needs to hear this, because I do this for me, because it's fun, not because I think I'm good enough for people to want to listen to me. And, signing up to be in the band was a huge step for me. And then going and performing, and I remember, like, the audition and everything, I was so scared. I was, like, freaking out. And when I got in the room, I was, like, stalling and, making chit chat. And she was like, no, do your audition. Like, I see what you're doing there. And then, being able to get through that and then start performing. And to begin, I didn't even sing. I was like, no, I'm not singing. That's, maybe eventually, but that's not happening right now. I'm only going to play guitar. And then I eventually got to a point where I was like, no, I need to start singing. Like, this is important. And God put me in this position for a reason. And obviously there's something going on here that I'm not quite seeing, because I have now gotten put into this position that I didn't even really want to be in. And the way everything just worked out between, meeting her before I ever went to Rock Band Camp, and then everything going so seamlessly at Rock Band Camp, and then me signing up for the band, like, it's so unlike me and so not something I would do. So it's so obvious this is something that God has for me. And so I was, just gonna do that. And I did kind of grow to be confident there. And I was like, wow, this is working for me. Like, I can do this. And then I got signed up. My parents signed me up for music lessons, and in that place I really started to grow also, and just going. And I had begun to feel, actually, at Rock Band Camp, I was like, the main worship pastor at our church shared his testimony and of how he came to be a worship pastor and why he did that and why he got to the position he's in now. And I just listened to that, and I was like, wow. And I had this thought in the back of my head, like, what if that's what I'm supposed to do? And I was like, no, right? Like, that's not for me. That's obviously someone else's job, because I was like, do you know that I hate public speaking? I hate performing in front of people. And then, from being in the band, and then these music lessons I started going to, I really grew there, and they regularly have open mics there, and having to perform through that, and, just really starting to put myself out there with my music. And then more recently, a couple months ago, I was like, what if I just started a YouTube channel? And because my mom, I had recorded these audition tapes for the college I'm going to become a worship pastor. And I've decided I'm going to be a worship pastor, but I still don't feel confident in my musical ability and in my talents. And I'm going to do this as a step of faith, but I still don't feel super confident in that. And so I had to record these audition tapes and everything for the worship arts department there. And my mom wanted the link for them on YouTube so that she could listen to them. And she was like, you should make me more videos like this on YouTube. You don't have to put them out to the world or anything, but then I can listen to them. And I'm an all or nothing kind of person. And so I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then I started to think about it, and I was like, well, I could do that, but I'm not just gonna make it private. If I'm gonna put all that effort in and make videos and stuff, I'm just gonna start posting it, period. And so I was just one day, I didn't even tell anyone. I just recorded it and then just posted it. And then I just kind of started slowly sending it to everyone, and I was telling people hey, I've got a YouTube channel now. I told every person in my contact, even people that I don't even really talk too much, or people that I met somewhere and I have their number still, but we're not that close. But I was here, I have a YouTube channel, and I just watched it grow and watch people start watching it. And I think the step of doing that and sending it to all these people, I think I had 60 people that I sent it to. And that put just enough in the algorithm of people watching my stuff that then the next thing I posted really took off. And I started posting. I think the next video I posted was a Josiah Queen cover. And I'm sure normal people know how the internet works, but I've never had social media before. So I figured out how to use hashtags. And so then when you watch the number, you refresh it and you see the view number keeps going up and up and up. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And it wasn't even that much in the end. It was under 2,000 is 1.2 thousand views or something, which to, the internet is not much. But to me, it was a lot. And I just started posting consistently, and it's only been a couple months, but I've been doing that, and I got over 100 subscribers on my main YouTube channel now. And it was just confirmation to me, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I had gone and talked to my friend the day I posted the Josiah Queen cover, and I told her no, it's the number is still going up. I posted this at 2 and it's now 6, and the number is still when I refresh it, it's going up. And she just looked at me and was like, you realize that that's God, right? God's doing that, and God's making a path for you. I was I hadn't even thought of that. I was I'm posting this silly video on the internet of me playing guitar, and that's it. And I was how small-minded of me to not even think about that. Obviously, that's God making a path for me to do this, and this thing that I thought I wasn't good enough to do, this is his confirmation. No, that's what I told you to do, and that's what you're meant to do, and look, you're doing it. And that was really amazing to me, and I was just wow, okay. And so I just kept posting there. And then the way the world is now, you kind of have to in order to get your stuff out there, you have to have all these different social media things. And I was always kind of against getting social media because it how it gets into your brain and everything. I think it ends up replacing God a lot of the time. But I started to think okay, God's made this way for me on YouTube. What if I got Instagram And I just started posting, the same thing I'm posting on YouTube, videos of myself, performing and everything. And so I went to talk to my mom about it. My mom was like, yeah, I think if you want to do that, that's cool. And so I got Instagram, and I've been posting on there too, and it's amazing. I can see it grow, and it's like slowly you can see like you're getting followers from it and everything. And the biggest point for me though is that like I'm putting this out into the world, and I do some secular music covers, but I'm also trying to primarily do Christian music covers. And I'm like, when I'm doing that, I'm putting God out into the world. I'm like, here's something about God and how much he loves you. And then like thousands of people are watching it. Like, that's crazy. And that's, in this day and age, like, that's how you reach people, is through the internet. And I think as a Christian, that's what I need to be harnessing. That's what I need to be doing, because that's what's getting to people. And so I've been posting on there, and then like probably a month ago, I just had this thought, and I was like, what if I started a podcast? And I immediately knew that was from God, because I would never start a podcast. Why would I do that? Like I said before, I hate talking to people, and I feel kind of self-conscious. And so I was like, oh, God wants me to start a podcast. And so I was like, okay, I'll do it, God. Because I try to make my immediate response to anything I feel from God is like, yes. But my immediate response was yes, but then I like postponed it, and I was like, okay, well, now I need to like do all this research, and I need to find perfect microphones, and I need to whatever, and I just kept postponing it. And I kind of told a couple people like, yeah, I think I might start a podcast, but I kept postponing it, and I kept finding little reasons to be like, no, I'm not going to do that. And the most recent excuse I had was so dumb that it made me realize I was making excuses for everything, because I was like, oh, I don't have the money to buy this microphone. And I like heard myself think that, and I was like, that is so dumb, because I just graduated, and it's really such a blessing, because people have been generous enough to give me a lot of money because I graduated. And I was like, are you for real? People have been like handing you cash, and you don't have enough money to buy a microphone to start a podcast because God wants you to. And so I was like, okay, now I have to go buy a microphone. And so I went on Amazon. I had like found the perfect microphone, and I was like, hey, order. And it was really interesting too, because I was like, okay, now I need to like set this up on YouTube and Instagram and Spotify, and I need to be ready to launch my first episode, this episode. And I was like, I need to make cover art. I was like, I didn't even think about cover art. What? And then I was like, you know what? I just took this most amazing photo the other day of the sunset on this walk with my family, and God was giving us this beautiful sunset. And I was like, I'm going to use that, and it's going to be amazing, and I'm going to put it on there. And in that same time, I've been praying about the name, and I came up with the name, and I put the name on there, and everything just started like working out and being perfect. And my microphones came, and my microphones, like I even thought that I needed to buy a separate cable for it, and no, I had the perfect cable for it. And I was like, wow, that is so obviously a God thing, and I need to stop postponing it. I don't need to be a perfect podcaster to make my first episode and to share my testimony with people. I just need to do it. And I started thinking like, I need to dream big for this. And so I made a list of like people I'm going to invite in the future to be on my podcast. And I made a list of like topics and things we're going to do. And like, this is going to be amazing. And also like how my friends responded. Like I told a couple of my friends, and they were like, no, yeah, we want to be on your podcast, and we want to share our testimony. And I was like, you do? Well, that's amazing, because I want you to. And like, this is so amazing. We're going to share Jesus with the world through this little podcast. And, who knows, this may stay really small, but it's so obvious that this is the direction that God has put me in. And, everything that I've gone through in the past, all the things I just said, and, it says in the Bible that, when you go through trials and persecutions, to be grateful for it, because God is working through you, and he has given me this powerful testimony now to share with the world. And, everything I go through in the future and everything I'm going through now and in the past, it's all just going further to be towards the glory of God, and for me to be able to reach those kinds of people. How am I supposed to reach lost people who are going through hard things if I've never been through a hard thing? And I truly believe that's what God has done with me, and that's why he's given me such a strong testimony, is to go and tell people and to be that person that understands what they've gone through, because I've gone through it. So anyways, that was my testimony, and that is where I am now. And I'm now going to college for worship arts and my master's of divinity. And God's just paving a path for that too, the way that my college has all worked out, and the way, like, the programs, the opportunities I've been given, it's clearly like this is the direction that God wants me to go in. And hopefully there'll be much more in the future to add to my story to tell everyone. And thank you to anyone that was listening to this and that stayed till the end. And yeah, please subscribe and listen for further, future stories and future testimonies, and everyone I'm going to be having on here to talk to. And, can't wait to see what God has in the future. And I'll see y'all on the next episode. Thank you for listening. Bye.